Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Development Corporation for April 10th, 2024. And I'm doing the Development Corporation first today because we have some matters where people are visiting with us. So first item is privilege of the floor, and I would do privilege of the floor for both the IDA and the Development Corporation. If there's somebody who is not in attendance who wishes to address the IDA later, I'll open it up for that. I have one blue card, Teresa Alt is with us, and so just come on up.
Is this working?
Yes.
Yes, good. First, with regard to local labor waivers, the contractor says, do not have local contract for flooring. Now, it seems to me that flooring is a pretty common thing, and it might be something for the IAED to address. How come there is no local contractor who can work on that? And should the IAED be encouraging the formation of such a business? Second, with regard to the project status list, which was very informative. However, I have two questions about it. The breeze, it says in process. Very unclear to me what, obviously that's something other than under construction, but what that means, I have no way to tell, not on the basis of common English. And a second question, the Hive, it says final approval never given. Now, I'm going to make a little objection to the use of the passive here, because it doesn't let us know who or what didn't give approval. Was it the IDA? Was it the planning board? You know, it's a big mystery. It should, an item like that should say something, you know, like IDA did not give approval, or planning board did not give approval, or whatever the agency was. Thank you.
Thank you. And typically we don't respond to comments from the floor, but I just for clarity, I believe the reference for the Hive is that we ended up not voting on it. That was withdrawn. Is that correct?
It was not formally withdrawn, but it wasn't brought back for a vote at the last IDA meeting where it was discussed. It was made clear by the IDA that they wanted to have some form of support from the city common council. There were conversations with the applicant, and the ball was in the applicant's court, so I didn't bring it back for a vote.
Right. Well, we can certainly talk about all of that further when we get to the IDA meeting. But thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the Development Corporation or the IDA? Seeing none, are there any additions to the agenda for the Development Corporation? I'm not aware of any. And then informational, we have a fund balance memo. Heather, do you want to speak to that?
Annually, we do sort of look at what the fund balance is and report to the HED committee of the legislature. So now that the audit was complete, we had final numbers. I just prepared a short memo to let you see what our fund balance is, both at the IDA, the Development Corporation, and included a chart that shows sort of the history of fund balance. You know, we're not sort of like a business where you generate more revenue every year. It's really dependent on the economy and the kinds of projects that you're seeing come in.
Are there any questions on the fund balance memo? I had one, which is with the vote we're going to be taking today regarding the bond for CMC, would that affect fund balance for the Development Corporation?
There will be fees associated with the refi.
Okay. All right. Anything further? All right. We have a couple items of business related to the Cuba Medical Center. The first is the final approval and the authorizing resolution. And I believe we may have a guest with us from the hospital, if you want to come forward.
Becky Gould, the CFO at Cuba Medical,
Welcome.
with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Could I get the resolution put on the floor? John moves, Jeff seconds. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome. Is there anything you just want to tell us about this? It looks like it's doing good stuff.
Yeah, so thank you. I have, I think, appeared here before to talk about this in a little bit, but we'll be using this bond to do a couple things. First is to refinance some existing bond payments that are due in April, so we'll be using it to do that. We'll also be working to purchase a new, it's not actually new, we're using the building, but we'll be now, instead of being tenants, we would be the owners of a building that's located in Cortland, where we offer urgent care and imaging services. And then we'll use the remainder of the funds to purchase capital equipment for the Cuba Medical Center.
Are there any questions, comments? John?
In reading the resolution, I noticed the first, or was that the third whereas on the first one on page 2, we're contemplating both the issuance of the bonds and also an exemption from mortgage recording taxes. Are we is that just pro forma language, or are we expecting that there's some specific mortgage recording taxes that we're abating here?
If I may, I'm happy to.
Go ahead, Russ.
Sorry about that. Yeah, John, as you know, or just to refresh everyone's recollection, the policy in Tompkins County is that any mortgage that gets recorded, only the state portion of the tax is exempted. So it would just be the state portion if, in fact, this is approved by the board.
But is there actually like...
Honestly, I'm not even sure that the mortgage is going to be part of the financing or the collateral package.
Yeah, we don't know whether there's going to be a mortgage in the first place. And interestingly, can we forgive Cortland County mortgage recording tax? Because would it be recorded there or here if the property?
Presumably, if there is a mortgage required, Rich, for collateral purposes, no, we couldn't exempt it from the allocable monies to the Cortland facility. And maybe, I apologize, I forget your name, the person from CMC. I think it's a very small percentage of the overall financing.
But we only do.
So in other words, if there is a mortgage that is recorded in Cortland County, excuse me, they would have to pay that tax or seek an exemption from the local IDA, LDC there.
I guess that begs the question, is there going to be any financing of using the property in Cortland as collateral?
I don't believe so. I don't believe we're using the property itself as collateral, but if there are any fees due, we certainly will pay them.
Okay, then I think, John, you've raised a fascinating question that is moot.
I mean, yeah, is this just in all of our bond resolutions? Like, I don't know if I just caught something that we've been approving as it is all along, or if this is like something that we added into this one.
Well, I don't think you caught anything. It just gives them if in fact there is a mortgage, and again, that's between the borrower and their lenders, we wanted to have the board approve it. Right. If it doesn't come to be, it doesn't happen, versus there being a mortgage after the fact, and then we have to come back to it.
Right. I guess really my other question is like, is that something that has to be done through the IDA? Can the Development Corporation actually exempt the mortgage tax?
The Development Corporation can.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a different process, but they can do it to the extent there is a mortgage that impacts the local tax, or excuse me, the state tax.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Ann?
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to get in on this moot conversation. So my recollection, just to see, and it's not about this project, but for other projects, when we exempt the mortgage recording tax, it was my recollection that that was the state portion, because there's a state portion and a local portion. Is that correct, that we've only done the state portion before?
That is correct, and that's what has always been the case at the IDA.
So again, I'm just wondering, even if this doesn't apply, what, are we usually saying that in there, that it's the state portion?
When I proofread this, I did go back and look at the last couple of bonds, and it is standard language in the development corporations authorizing resolutions about the mortgage recording tax. I think Russ could speak to the state local share.
I'm just thinking.
The way it's typically done anyway is when we close, or when a transaction closes that is availing itself of the state portion of the recording tax, when that mortgage is required or filed, we basically have the borrower make an in lieu of tax payment for the local share, which then is remitted to the taxing jurisdictions in accordance with their percentage, allocation.
And would we be doing that for this transaction as well? If there is a mortgage?
If there is a mortgage, yes.
I don't anticipate there being a mortgage.
So I don't recall seeing those fees in the future. If we could make sure we know what that amount is, if we're saying in lieu of, like, okay, Tompkins County is going to get this in lieu of the recording tax. I don't remember seeing figures for it before.
Yeah, it's 25
projects.
Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 25 basis points is the local share, or I may have it backwards, and then the state share is the remaining part.
Yes, 1/4% is the local share.
Right.
And just, again, the fascinating discussion, I hadn't really thought through all this, that if there's a payment in lieu, it doesn't go to the IDA or the development corporation, it goes to the municipality. So from our standpoint, it's revenue neutral. It's just a pass-through. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that is correct. In fact, the IDA never sees them, or the LDC never sees the money. It's paid directly to the clerk when the mortgage is recorded.
Okay.
Right. One more thing. I'm just thinking in the future, if possible, I would like to see that for transparency, that this is how much the payment's going to be for the recording tax, and it's transparency to the public too, and to the county, that this is what they're getting in lieu of. This is what they would have paid if they didn't have this exemption to the
I think that's a good idea.
municipality.
That's a good point. Yeah, John.
And in the case, like, if somebody's going to the dormitory authority and getting, as our sort of primary competitor, as it were, would they be paying a mortgage recording tax if there's a mortgage recorded associated with the bond?
No.
They wouldn't pay a local mortgage tax?
It would be wholly, typically anyway, and I don't do a lot of work with DASNY, but at the deals that I've done, yes, they pay, or they exempt the full mortgage recording.
Including the local portion?
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
to my knowledge, we're the only IDA in New York State that doesn't exempt the local portion.
But thanks, DASNY.
Yeah.
We could do good stuff with that money.
Indeed.
Okay.
Although I'm sure they're saying the same thing about us every time we cut off their portion, but not ours, right? So.
Yeah.
That's different.
Heather, did you have
I'll
something?
just note on, when we see IDA projects on the application, we do identify what the mortgage recording tax abatement amount is.
And on occasion, we've actually, on the sales tax side, we've come back and raised the sales tax amount because the project got bigger, they had cost overruns. So we have had some transparency to that, but
Yeah.
good. Okay. All right. Anything further? Are we ready to vote? All right. I'll call the roll. Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So,
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
okay. And then I think we have
Was there two?
yeah, I think we've got a second one we need to,
There's the 2013 and 2022 modification, so that was the final approval of the refi from 2024.
Yes, so
Right, those are the new, right, just to clarify the difference, the resolution that was just presented and approved is for a new bond issuance, refinancing certain prior debt. The resolution for the 2013 bonds basically is the borrower and CMC and their lenders agreed to, with respect to the 2013 bonds, extend the maturity date to May 31, so by a year approximately, and then the interest-only period for payment on the 22 bonds through July of 2025. And there are certain documents that have to be amended that the IDA has to sign as the conduit issuer. But it does not impact the IDA or the LDC in any way, shape, or form.
All right. Move, and Jeff seconds. This is the authorizing resolution on page 13 of the agenda packet. And I see our guest has gone on to other things. So, okay. Any discussion on the authorizing resolution? Are we ready to vote? Duck?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So no drama at all there. Okay. I think next item of business is entitled Block 14 Request, and I think we have a couple guests with us today.
Before we start, right, I should probably at this point disclose, as has been disclosed in writing, the potential conflict, which is that I serve on the board of the LDC, which is the requester in this case, and Russ prepared a memo about that for everyone's consideration, and my understanding of the mechanic here is I should go, and you all should decide if I should participate in this conversation or not.
Yeah, and just for the record, I'd note that we did receive advice from our counsel indicating that you are receiving no financial benefit at all from your participation in this separate corporate entity. So there is no actual conflict, but the perception of a conflict probably lends itself to the better course being to recuse yourself. So we'll give you a moment to excuse yourself, and we'll invite our guests up at the same time. So please, if you want to come forward.
Just a point of order. I thought we were the procedure is to discuss whether he needs to recuse himself. That we were going to discuss that while he was recused.
If I may, and I think the best court, and if that's what the board wants to do, that's perfectly fine, but I think John should not be part of those initial discussions if in fact that's what the board wants to do. And then if the board decides with respect to the request that, you don't feel that he needs to recuse, then he can participate. But I think the initial determination, he should probably not participate.
Right, so I'd like us to have a discussion whether he should be, whether we think.
Go ahead.
Either way. I don't, because of there's no financial compensation anticipated, well, there's none now, there's no financial compensation for John participating in that board, and no financial consideration later that we know of. I mean, there could always be something, if it's going to be developed, for instance, there always could be something later, but we don't usually recuse somebody because there could be some possibility that doesn't really follow it like a track of like we've done before.
No, that's true. And as I sit here, I don't see that he has any prohibited conflict. I also think that, he has discretion in this case whether to recuse himself or not. And he's indicated he's willing to do that just to avoid the perception, among the public that there might be a conflict here. I don't think there is an actual one.
No, you're right, Rich. There's not. We did analysis on the appearance versus an actual prohibited conflict, which would require the board member to resign from the board. That's not the case here. So, from a practical standpoint, best practices would dictate that he probably recuse. And if in fact he has colleagues that he's working with respect to the ask. They can make the presentation, and if the requisite board members are still available to vote on it and they approve it, it's the same result. But that's up to the board.
Anybody else wish to be heard? Jeff?
Yeah, I think it would be right for him to recuse in this initial stage there, just because of the perception. Especially if we're going to move forward and vote on this. I think it would be better from a transparency perspective that we're perceived to be he was not involved.
Okay. Todd, did you have something?
Yeah, I just agree with what you just said there, Jeff just said, and Ann.
Okay, Doug?
I agree. I personally have no issue with John participating, but for the good of transparency and for the image of the board, it's best that he recuse himself.
Okay. I think that's the path.
Or are we saying just for today's discussion at least?
We certainly could revisit it if we got to a different point, but yeah, for today.
Okay, just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Gary, Mac, welcome. Thanks for coming in. Do you want to talk with us?
Yeah,
Do you have something you want to say?
Give you a little introduction. Matt?
Yeah, Gary's asked me to start on this. I'm a local developer, Mac Travis, and been very involved since the mid-90s with forming the bid. And we hired Gary in '99, and he has been the brains behind what's happened downtown, quite frankly. One of his initial ideas was form a local development corporation, and just in case sometime we need to function as a developer within the DIA, the bid. And we did LDC 1, which did the convention center, and has been very successful. So in Gary's last year there, we had a call from Wayne Woodard, who owns the 3 houses, State Street, and 2 on Geneva, right across from the Catholic Church, that he'd like to sell them, and he thought maybe that would help the community in some way. So we formed LDC 2. It's not-for-profit, and as with the other projects that the bid has supported and been involved in, we're focusing on improving the economic vitality of downtown. So our recused member, John Guttridge, who's quite a smart guy in this field, and Gary and myself are the founding committee of LDC 2. And the only project we're focused on is Block 14. And as John has made clear, we've all pledged to volunteer or work on a volunteer basis, and will not be participants or recipients of any direct gains from the project. We will expand this LDC 2 to include other community stakeholders, and the county has been invited to participate. So Gary, you want to talk about why Block 14?
Yeah, the question that might come to some of you is, what's so significant about Block 14? Block 14, for those of you who don't know, is I call it a key block. It's bordered by Seneca Street, Geneva Street, West State or MLK, and what am I missing?
Albany.
What's that?
Albany.
Albany, yes. It's literally right across the street from Shortstop Deli. And for many years, it's been called Block 14 by the city. It's very rare that certainly in the urban part of our community, that one block could be put together as a potential redevelopment opportunity at any one time. Seldom, if ever, happens. But this offers a possibility for that to happen. The block has 2 property owners, the private owner who Mac referenced earlier, and the Tompkins County itself. The LDC so far has been able to work with the private company, the private developer, the private owner of the property, and we are continuing to work with the county as well. This block really serves as a transitional block between downtown and the rest of West State Street and the West End. And it really is a critical sort of, it's really a critical block in the urban core, one that really provides that sort of transition zone between two areas. And right now, that area is under a great deal of pressure, and it really is in need of some investment. That is why we looked at it and said, wow, this is a great opportunity to do something for the community. If we can assemble this and then put it out for at the LDC, it could then work to put it out on the marketplace with some conditions so that it could be developed in a way that's beneficial to the community. We think that it will provide not only great benefit for the community, but economic stimulus and catalytic effect for that entire area. And so that's why we're pretty excited about trying to work on this particular block itself. So, Mac?
Could I just jump in? You used the term pressure, that this block is subject to specific pressure.
Well, there hasn't been a lot of development pressure. There was a sense that this area was going to redevelop rather quickly, just like East Downtown had done so, and obviously with many of the projects that have come before this organization. That has not happened in the way I think people anticipated. This area is challenged. There's certainly the incidents of crime and safety continue to plague this area. The county itself has a facility that has been the subject of a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, a lot of concern about employees and how that area is affecting it. So again, I think there's a sense that what happens here could really paint a picture for what could be done for the rest of the area and how it should be done, and so I think that's part of when I say this could be a transformational opportunity for us and for the community, one that we don't always have the opportunity to do.
So far, being a developer, the first rule is to have site control. And we have put down $25,000 as a deposit for a one-year option, renewable. And we were very pleased when the county decided to relocate the community office of the aging to their new site. And the goal is to assemble the entire block, and we've had Holt do an initial massing study. We know that the parking for the county is paramount, that you need space. And it seems that could be done. Our goal is to come up with a general concept that would fly with the county so that you would put your property in the pot and then find a private developer, not us, not John, not me, not Gary, who would take this and refine it and make it into what it's got to be. I mean, is it a transit hub? Is it a, parking garage has been discussed many times. What's it got to be? Affordable housing and so forth. So it's got a lot of possibilities, and we own personally the family medicine across the street, zone 6 stories. I was just in Sweden for a short time, in Stockholm, where I lived for a while, and went into busy street downtown, walked through the entrance, went up the elevator. There was a beautiful courtyard with apartments all around it, planters, trees, playgrounds for the kids. And there's no reason that couldn't happen here with, parking, whatever, transit center on the bottom, retail. So, Gary, why do we need support?
Well, we've existed through donations and contributions to date. We've been able to acquire the option. We've been able to pay legal fees going forward to get us to that point. We gave you a budget that showed the costs we think it's going to take to get this over the finish line, till we have a developer actually in tow, or developers who can then begin working on this project themselves. There are some basic things that have to happen. We have to make sure the site is going to meet environmental expectations. Some of that has been already provided by county administration, but there's still a little bit of work that probably has to be done to be smart about this. There's some planning work and effort that has to be done for the county to participate. Dealing with their parking that exists on that parcel is a prerequisite. And so that's a given, and that work has to be done to make sure that happens and happens effectively. And then, we know this is going to take a couple of years. This is not going to be done. I wish it could be done in 1 year. It's not going to be done in 1 year. And so there's going to be need for another option payment to control the property. And then finally, whatever it takes to work with the developers and the folks along the way to make sure that there's the attorneys involved get paid. So that's the budget that we'd laid out. We are looking to use whatever resources we can to help make that happen. We're not really in a great position to, state money is usually reimbursable. So while we certainly would like to go after some of that if we can, it's not if you don't have a lot of money up front and pay it out and then wait for reimbursement a year or two down the road, that's a little more of a challenging thing for this particular case, hence our sitting and talking with you today. So that's sort of an introduction.
Okay. Why don't we open it up for questions? Jeff?
Matt, Gary, thanks for coming in. Appreciate the information. So help me understand from the county, the Office of the Agent. So I haven't kept up to that. They are moving that facility, and when do you anticipate them moving that?
Whenever you get the building built on the corner of Tioga.
Yeah, that would be part of the center of government project. So
turn to the county people there. So
yeah, we recently
29.
The timeline for the center of government building is looking like 2028, I believe.
Okay.
And that may make some sense. We still think that sort of links up. It's going to take until end of 2025 to even get us to a point where we can get to the starting line on this with the developer, and then they have to go through their process, which takes 1 year to 2 years all by itself. So the timeline actually is not inconsistent with what we're seeing here.
So do you anticipate then, I mean, you've got in your budget a second option. I mean, we all know what happens with development. Could that go to a third then, or potentially?
We have the right, I think. We take ownership at that point.
After the second option?
Yeah. Our goal would be to have a development team in place by then.
Okay.
That is at least the goal that we're working with today.
Got it. And then in terms of, I know you had listed 3 options for the funds. You said obviously the IDA, the county, and then the state.
Right.
Where do you stand with the county at this point in terms of discussions?
We have 2 county legislators who have been working with us. But we have not gone back to the county to seek additional funds at this point. We are starting right now with you folks, because we think that this probably is the first place to start. The county, obviously, we're working with the county as a participant in the project and on a level that they're trying to determine what makes the most sense. So that's still going on right now. But we have not gone back and said, hey, you know, in case you have some additional revenue, we are looking. So this is where we're starting, because it seemed to be the logical first place that certainly seemed to make the most sense logistically.
And sorry, one more question,
Sure.
and maybe for Russ too. So Russ, I'm assuming because we're going through the CDC, gives us a lot more flexibility. We could even loan it. You know, as obviously was mentioned in here, that we could require a repayment upon sale, that type of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot, Jeff, that's a good point. There's a lot more, pardon me, flexibility with the use of LDC money versus the use of IDA money. There's more strings attached, and there's a number of issues. So to the extent this is something the board wants to pay for, my recommendation would be that if, to the extent the finances are there, to source the money from this organization versus the IDA. And we can structure however the board, you know, would like, as a loan, as a grant, that's repayable. So it's really up to the board from the, you know, business decision, how you want to structure it.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? I have a couple questions. It sounds like there's a real range of possible outcomes here, where, say, if you went forward and you found there were serious environmental issues, there wouldn't be any money that could be reimbursed from the state, and you probably wouldn't want to proceed, or it would be a very different development project. And so we could potentially lose the $90,000 investment from this end. On the other hand, it could be New York State would reimburse, or the developer would reimburse upon taking over the project. Are those possible outcomes too?
They are. Our initial indication from looking at the records from the county is that it appears to be a clean site. So that's one reason why.
That was a hypothetical.
Why we're continuing to look. But nevertheless, having said that, I think it behooves us and everyone else to make sure that we are checking as carefully as we can. Not that we're going to do a full environmental review that a developer would do, but we do enough to make sure that anybody who's coming into this project knows what they're getting into. Certainly one option that we've always talked about would be, in the worst case, if no one seems to like this idea and it just falls apart for whatever reason, we would either purchase the property and sell it off to recoup what we could, and it would be developed piecemeal, like it probably would otherwise. Obviously, that's not our goal. That's not why we got into this in the first place. We thought that getting a full block to do a transformational effort there was worth the effort. So that's why we're doing that.
And I assume the options would allow purchase at some sort of market price. And I don't want you to talk about price here in open session, but.
Well, the option would be, yes, in this particular case, it would be for a long-term land lease up to 99 years. So it's an alternative to purchasing. It was what we were able to work out that we thought made fiscal sense for a project.
Okay. Todd, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just curious, would you, if you're granted this, would you commit to hiring contractors or subcontractors that use local labor?
Well, at this point, we're going to be working with the county, and so I suspect anybody who is going to be doing this project is going to be coming to this body seeking help and assistance, because this is clearly in the CTAP area, and undoubtedly would require that, especially as we are looking at community benefits for this project. It's going to require assistance and help. So anybody coming to this, they're going to have to, by default, need to do that and follow your regulations. So it has been our anticipation all along that would happen. As we put an RFP together, it probably makes sense to even just talk about that, but we could just reiterate that because, again, all expectations on this is that no one's going to pick this up unless they're kind of be coming back to this body at some point to seek the assistance they're going to need to make a project of this, and at this location, at this particular, with all the different needs that we're talking about, happen.
Okay, thank you.
Ann.
So looking at your financial sheet of your expenses and sources, which ours is packet page 20. So if, for instance, this body voted for 45,000 instead of 90, do you foresee? You talked about, or you mentioned a few possible revenue sources of possibly, the state or the county. I don't know if you can say, but how likely would you be willing to, for instance, accept 45,000 and still be able to continue with your work?
That's a really good question. I suppose we would. And then, clearly, to finish this project, we're going to need this is the amount we think we're going to need. So 45,000 would help get us there. We would just need to be able to, I think, we'd have to then determine what we would need to do. Would we start spending that money right away, or would we wait to see if we can assemble the rest of it before we got going? So but that's not none of us have had that discussion. So I can't tell you the answer to that other than we would have that discussion and try to figure that out.
Thanks for your frankness.
Okay. Anybody else? Doug?
This might be premature, but I just want to express that I'm wholly supportive of the idea of the transformative vision that is possible on this block. I do agree that it's a challenging site. It is a transition area, but it's also one that we at the city, obviously there are multiple opinions because there's 11 people on council and people on the planning staff have different opinions, but I think there's general agreement that we want to see that corridor improve and better connected to the West End, and this would be a really important part of that. And it's so far out, and we'd want community feedback on what to do with it, but the options that you've listed are all, high priorities in different sectors of the community. So I could get behind any of them depending on what else happens in the city. The Seneca Street garage get rebuilt, and so maybe the transportation hub isn't needed. There's a lot up in the air, but just having control of an entire block has so much potential. I'm very excited by the possibilities.
Doc, I'm glad you mentioned the city, because obviously city support would be pretty critical to this being successful. I'm curious what kind of conversations you've had to this point with city government.
We've talked with city folks. We're actually got a meeting set with mayor, city manager, and planning director and others coming up actually in a week or so to go over this in much more detail. They are aware of the project, and ultimately we'd like to see them involved in the LTC itself. So,
okay. If everybody's, I would jump in. I echo what Duck was just saying about this could potentially have transformative impact and would be really good for downtown and frankly the tax base in the city if this was developed. And in setting sort of the method for moving down State Street, I think the Ironworks building is a really nice idea of what could be done on that corridor, and this would fill in some of that space. So I am supportive of the Development Corporation or the IDA, depending on what our council ends up determining, providing assistance, whether it's partial or whole. You know, getting partway there, I don't know that it gets us the answers. The 90 would get us the answer, can this be done, and is it feasible, hopefully. I would support that, but I'd sure like to know in more concrete terms what the people at the city are saying in terms of their support and their potential participation. I'm curious, what kind of timeline are you under? How soon would you need us to say yes or no?
The timeline we're under really is dictated by the private option, the option agreement we have with the private party. So it's a year option that started when, Mac?
I think in
That first of the year, right toward the end of last year? Yeah, December of, so it's, I mean, our goal is to have this not go more than 2 years before we can turn it over to someone else. So only because it just keeps, it keeps adding up. And I think, you know, it is our belief we can do what we need to do, work with the city, the county, stakeholders to come up with a project concept that will, again, be community beneficial, and then put that out on the marketplace and see how we can begin to get some response.
Okay. You know, I'm concerned that we have one member who's recused themselves, I think appropriately, but is not participating in the discussion, and we have somebody else who's absent because she had a conflict. So I'm thinking we would perhaps hold off making a decision and discuss it further at our next meeting, and perhaps we could have some information from your communications with the city. But Ann, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to also add that, you know, I and many other county legislators are very supportive of, you know, the same things that Rich and Duck said. You know, we're really excited, and this doesn't happen very often, if ever, you know, for the city or for other areas. So I know in Trumansburg, having a plot of land close to the village, you know, to really do on a site that INHS has done, you know, with a developer, just really doing a transformative project when you have some area, like, you know, a significant amount of land. So you can really be creative. Like I also have seen different things, different parts of the country or different parts of the world of like, oh, geez, why can't we do that here? And so I think it does give us, you know, that opportunity.
Anybody else? Right. Heather, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. All right. Perhaps you could give us some update before our next meeting just on how everything went with the city. Mm-hmm. And if there's any further news from the county, love to hear that too.
Right. We will do it on both fronts. Good. Thank you very much.
All right. Oh, thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, I do not have a chair's report. Is there a staff report for the Development Corporation?
Just in terms of the Cayuga Medical Center bond, that did go through, let's see, the Housing and Economic Development Committee of the County Legislature. It will go to the Tompkins County Legislature on April 16th, and then a resolution will be passed by the Finance and Administration Committee of the Cortland County Legislature on April 16th, and then a final approval from the Cortland County Legislature on April 25th. Since that project straddles both counties, there'll be approvals by both legislatures. And that's all I have.
Okay. That does make it a more complicated thing with the financing crossing county lines. I don't think I've seen that before. Okay, we have minutes from the March 13th, 2024 board meeting. Could I get a motion to approve? Todd moves and seconds. Questions or comments on the minutes? Right. Seeing none. Duck?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Is there any other business to come before the Development Corporation? Seeing none, I would take a show of hands on adjourning. Okay, we are adjourned. And I would call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency for April 10th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. And first item, privilege of the floor. If there's anybody who has now appeared who wishes to address the IDA. Seeing none, are there any additions to the agenda? John.
I'd like to add an executive session to discuss pending litigation and personnel matters.
Okay. All right. All right. We will take a vote on that when we get to that point in the meeting then. Okay. Informational, we have the fund balance memo. And you saw that in the Development Corporation minutes. Is there any further discussion on fund balance, particularly on the IDA side? Okay. No? Okay. I don't believe we have any pending business before the IDA this month. Ann?
So the project status,
It's under the staff report.
so that'll be.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a minute.
We'll get to that, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do not have a chair's report this month, but we're getting to staff report and outstanding project list. So Heather, do you want to speak to this?
At the request of one of the board members, I included a list of our outstanding projects to date, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Ann?
It's not a question, but I was just thinking about the comment we had regarding the last one, the Hive, the Cherry Clinton, the final approval never given. So, I mean, to me, looking at it, it seems, you know, it's right under IDA final approvals, final approval never given. So to me, it's self-explanatory, but I'd like to hear if other people have any other input on that.
Hey, John?
Actually, I mean, I have kind of a process question here. It's like an application came before us, we moved it to public hearing, and then it just didn't show up on our agenda again. It seems like if there's something that's been proposed, it should be acted upon, whether in the affirmative or in the negative, and it shouldn't just like hang out in the ethers. I, you know, kind of the opinion that if it hasn't been withdrawn, it should be voted on. I mean, you know, someone asked us a question, we've just sat here not answering it, and I think that that's
True,
questionable.
although I'm not entirely sure they're continuing to ask the question.
Right, I mean, at which point it should probably be considered withdrawn. I mean, you know, like if this comes up again, it should go back through a public hearing. We should have a new application, et cetera. And I don't know if we have a policy around, you know, it's like if not acted on, do we effectively have a pocket veto kind of situation where it's like if we haven't acted on it within some period of time. But, you know, it's like this was partway through the process, and my expectation would be that the public would expect of us that if this comes up again, that we would have fresh information, fresh transparency, and a fresh opportunity for a public hearing. So I personally would like to see us either act conclusively or have a policy that if we have not done so within some period of time, that's considered to be, you know, rejected or withdrawn.
Okay, this is Russ, real quickly. John, that's a good point. We work with IDAs that have a time constraint. And I don't want to just put some numbers out there. So some IDAs will say if you don't close within a year of the final resolution, the board has the right to basically rescind all prior approvals, unless there's a rational basis for not closing the deal. And a lot of the holdup has been not just in Tompkins County, but throughout the state, it's just the interest rate climate.
I actually think,
get cheap money.
Russ, I don't mean to cut you off, but this is a very different situation. This is an application that was brought to us, brought before a public hearing, and then just didn't come back up for a vote, right? So it's like the project kind of got dropped, but it wasn't formally withdrawn, nor was it formally acted upon. And so my sort of, the thing that I'm wrestling with on this very specifically is like, you know, like I would hate to see this just appear on our agenda next month for a final vote, right? Like that would be, I think, a huge failure of transparency on our part. And so, you know, I actually think that, you know, like once an application is submitted, if it's not acted upon by the board, it should expire within some period of time. And we should go back through public hearing, a benefits memo that's been updated, new numbers, all of the stuff. So, I think there's a whole other question, like when we approve a project, there is a time period on it, and we often extend if the project hasn't actually closed, if, you know, they come back to us and say, oh, you know, we had some trouble with bidding or interest rates or, you know, rearranged our development team or, you know, fired our contractor in the middle of the project, et cetera, right? We've seen all sorts of things, and we often act to extend, but this feels like it's in a hole that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, you know, this is, John, you make a good point, and there's a legal concept that you learn about in law school, and people use the word all the time, but it never seems to quite apply, which is latches. You know, that we've got some time period that passes, and we probably shouldn't act, but there's no statute of limitations specifically. Maybe we should have some sort of staleness measure that things should come back to us, but yeah, Jeff.
But wouldn't we have the opportunity, if it did show up on the agenda, wouldn't we have the opportunity as a board to then request additional or updated information and then even request they go through a public hearing because it is stale?
I think we could certainly do that, but it wouldn't be automatic. It would take our action. But we could certainly exercise judgment in those circumstances and say, I think we need to know more. But we're speaking hypothetically, and I think we might have some actual information here. Heather?
So this project did go to public hearing. It came back for final approval. There was a resolution in your agenda packet, and the board chose to table it until such time that approval was received from the Common Council. As administrative director, I had several conversations with the applicant. The Common Council member that was the representative in that district had never been in support of Cherry Street, that portion of Cherry Street actually being zoned for housing. So there were some initial conversations with that Common Council member, and they said absolutely not. I would not support it at the Common Council. If it came, I would make sure that it were not supported. So the applicant said, my hands are sort of tied, and I suggested that he withdraw the application, and he said that, you know, should anything change, he would get back to me. So as a matter of practice, and I've had projects in the past, long before any of you were on the board. If a project comes in and you look at the application, send it to a public hearing, or not even send it to a public hearing, but ask for additional information, if a significant amount of time has passed, and I would say even 3 or 4 months usually, I would ask the applicant to revise the application. So, you know, in this instance, if Todd Fox came back tomorrow, I would say, it's been how long? You really need to resubmit the application. And just as a matter of practice, I would do that, but I don't disagree that maybe there should be something in our UTEP that says, you know, if you haven't acted upon, or, you know, I mean, the IDA did table it, and if you wanted to untable it and vote no or yes or whatever, you could certainly do that.
I mean, I think it's just a matter of, like, in this particular case, because we created this hole, we should go ahead and close it. Like, they're clearly not going to bring us anything that we asked for, and if they come back with a new application, we certainly could consider it again. But my opinion would be we should go ahead and reactivate this and go ahead and reject it. And, you know, it's like, and make clear in the minutes that, you know, we would consider a fresh application with new information.
I guess I'll raise my hand. I guess I'd like to think about that a little bit, because I am not sure I want to send a negative message on this project. Looking back on how this played out, I think this was one of the most unfortunate things we ended up facing here, is that we could not get the city to say, we want this. Well, and at the same time, you look at it, it's housing, it's building a neighborhood, it's next to the art house. It really would have, I think, done very good things for that space. It would further the whole development of that region of the city. And, there were amenities connected to it. Now the lot is right next to the new pedestrian bridge. This could have been a really positive thing. And from our standpoint, we don't need city approval. We want it. And certainly the CTAP is built around that whole concept, but we're an independent agency and we could have said yes anyway. And I know that politically it's hard to do that in the face of ambiguity from a municipality, which was the case here. It wasn't opposition, it was just they wouldn't say one way or the other. And I understand why we might be reticent to proceed in those circumstances, but we lost a really good project, I believe, as a result. So, John.
I mean, I mostly agree. I will point out that actually there was not ambiguity from the city. This particular area was considered to be included in the CTAP zone on 3 separate occasions and voted against on 3 separate occasions by the city. And that, I mean, I think that that's sort of like where it's like, okay, like if it was really ambiguous, and I mean, we did the City Harbor project, which is outside the CTAP boundary, but not for any particularly good reason, and it hadn't really been considered, et cetera, and we moved forward anyway. Likewise, the unfortunately not yet complete Cliff Street Retreat project. So I think that's I actually think this one was reasonably well considered, and I think I agree with you that I think it's an unfortunate outcome, but I think that we did actually consider that carefully.
We did receive a letter from the then mayor, and it was in support, but incredibly tepid.
But I mean, I think in sort of support of what you're saying, it's like, I don't know if there's a process to just sort of like, rather than actually rejecting, voting no on the project, to simply just like cancel the application, if we can do that as a board.
Let me hear from Duck first.
Well, actually, this conversation kind of answered my question, because I wasn't sure what city support means. It sounds like the CTAP endorsement is part of it. The mayor being supportive is part of it. It certainly didn't come before council. It sounds like, well, I know, yes, it's clear that both former representatives of that board were not supportive of housing on that site. But as a whole, council might have felt differently. The current representatives may feel differently. So I alluded to this earlier with Block 14, but like the city is multiple people and personalities and bodies, and so I'm curious, like, which cues are most important to this body?
Yeah, I think we could have benefited from more full communication with the whole Common Council. This is just unfortunate, and maybe some of that lies with us here, that we should have been more proactive, but we're here where we are today. John, perhaps we could proceed by just indicating that if this were to get resurrected, it would require a new application and not go further than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what I'm looking for here, is like, can this not just be the zombie thing that's sitting there because we left it there? I'm sorry, Heather, I didn't realize we had done that to you. But can we be clear that like we're asking for a new application, a new public hearing if it comes back up?
Yeah, I can certainly do that.
Without specifically rejecting the project, like, because I think I agree. I'd love to see the project happen.
Yeah.
I can certainly communicate that to the applicant.
And I mean, do we need some kind of formal action from the board to create that state?
I'm not sure we do. It seems like there's no dispute here, and if suddenly somebody came in and said we want to vote on it, I think we'd say we'd need a new application.
And then I guess answering the bigger picture question of like, do we have some place where we keep track of things that we're looking at our UTEP annually or whatever. I mean, we have a committee that does that from time to time. I don't remember what that structure is, but
I keep
want to stale date
I keep
things.
sort of a running list. I can
so
add
if we
this
could
to
put
the
this on
list.
it of like, stale dating of things, if they sit around too long, they should come back up. What's that time?
Does anybody have comment more generally on this list? I think that there's some sort of macroeconomic questions I think we're facing. John?
I'm curious, I mean, there are a whole lot of them that just say on hold. I was kind of, as the person who requested this, I was hoping that we would have some kind of an indication of like, what is our best guess as to what's going to happen with each of those. And, I don't know if like, right, you're in regular contact with all these folks, or do we think these things are just, I mean, we're probably, inflation data suggests we're going to see continued high interest rates for a while.
City Harbor has said that they're rebidding and they hope to start construction this year. They said that last year. And I heard that in the fall. Carpenter Park Mixed Use is teeing up to start construction. They do have some things that they'll need to come to the IDA for. Their sales tax abatement expired, so the IDA will need to extend that. There's a couple of other just for lack of better word, wonky thing with this was part of, the affordable housing and the medical office building, and the parcels were split, so there were some changes there. So the applicant and I are working on bringing that in next month. Asteri is under construction. I think they should be done this summer. Asteri Conference, I'm told, is pretty much done. They're just waiting for the apartments. BVSHF, I have not heard from him since last fall. When I talked to him last fall, he said, I'm on hold, I'm waiting for interest rates, I really don't know. NSF Enfield is under construction. Knickerbocker is probably pretty much complete. I think their sales tax expired or expires soon. So, and we'll be out there tonight. So I think we'll see that some of us will be anyway, is pretty much completed. Hillside Paradise was approved, and I would keep it on my list for maybe a year or two, but he did withdraw. He decided not to do the project and remain in his current location. Cliff Street, the last I heard, they were trying to figure out how to find some more investors to help facilitate making that project move forward. They had some water pressure issues that they were not able to put in any kind of restaurant or kitchen, so they had to sort of rethink a neighborhood cafe kind of thing. The costs were just too prohibitive to deal with the water pressure issues for I think the entire neighborhood. The Dean is nearly complete. The Breeze, and it is not unusual for a project to close on their sales tax and then close on the pilot subsequently. We are waiting to close on the pilot. There were some additional costs that they were unable to finance, so they're trying to come up with that little bit of gap. When they're able to close on the financing, the pilot will always close as coterminous with the financing, because that's how the IDA takes title through the lease and lease back through that mortgage process. So I've been told soon. We thought it was going to be in March. It's April now. I would anticipate it should close, but,
At Ted Fox?
Yes, that's the Ithaca gun site. The Citizen is on hold. His numbers don't work. I know he received his approvals, and I usually really push applicants, don't come until you have a term sheet from a bank, you're nearly ready to go. But sometimes things happen. I know the building was torn down. This is the old Joe's site. But the last I heard was that the numbers don't work. They're trying to sell it. So, this is the kind of case where they paid $1,000 for an application fee, and if the project doesn't move forward, they're not getting a pilot or a sales tax or anything else. And of course, this is the kind of project where if they came back a year from now and said, we're ready to start up, I'd say, give me a construction budget, has anything else changed? Like, there would be some due diligence, as, there always has been if there's been a significant amount of time. The stately, they have applied for tax credits. They did not get the amount or the dollar amount for the tax credits that they had anticipated, so there's a very large gap in the project. I know they've had several meetings and several discussions with the Department of Housing and Community Renewal about other HTF, Housing Trust Fund financing or other kinds of financing to help bridge some of that gap. So it may still happen, I'm not sure.
Fox project?
Conifer, I think we have all the documents drafted and it's really in the ball's in their court to sign. Since they missed the March 1 tax status date, they would need, it won't go into effect until next year. So my guess is, there's fees associated with this. They have some time until they need to close on that pilot. And it was really just, it was an extension of a pilot that had recently expired, that was done by the town of Ithaca. And the solar project we just approved, and they closed, and they are anticipating construction start later this year.
Thank you.
Yes.
I guess I have a broad question that we may not have any kind of good answer to, but for development to go forward, you need all sorts of things to align. You need low interest rates or reasonable interest rates. You need construction costs that are in the ballpark, and you need developers that have capital that they want to invest in projects, and you need local municipalities that are welcoming. We've had a remarkable string of good luck, or good alignment, I guess. I won't call it luck. That I think we worked very hard at getting where everything was in position. But right now on the national level, it seems like inflation is still bubbling along. Interest rates are not coming down as quickly as we want. Construction costs, materials are still quite expensive. All that said, I'm wondering, we're very, very conservative with our incentives compared to other municipalities or other counties. Maybe we should, I'm not saying we should, but maybe we should examine whether the marginal difference in granting some additional incentives would get these projects going. Because if they're not built, we have no construction jobs, we get no payment into the Community Housing Development Fund, we get no tax base increase, we get no housing. Maybe the formula has to modify a little bit. I don't know. I'd invite comment on that. Jeff?
Your comment about our incentives are less generous, is that something that you could put an analysis together to help us understand where we are and where other counties are surrounding it? Is that something feasible?
Yeah, the majority of the IDAs are doing 15 and 20-year abatements. Standard abatement schedules for many IDAs look like 100% for 5 years, 75% for 5 years, 50% for 5 years, 25% for 5 years, for a total of 20 years. It's not unusual to see a 20-year pilot in other communities. I could certainly do, reach out and look at other IDAs and their UTEPs. Some IDAs do it on a case-by-case basis, but in conversations with a lot of my counterparts at the conferences and the IDA academies that I go to, we are the most conservative in New York State in terms of the incentive levels.
Okay, John.
I guess I wonder what those communities are experiencing right now in terms of like, are their projects going forward while ours are stalled? I think, you know, one of the things that is true as well, while we may be the most conservative in terms of incentives, you know, our market in general has been like the one upstate New York community that's actually seeing profound levels of growth, while, you know, like other communities are not. And so I think we should just, you know, approach such a thing with caution, and make sure that the incentives, any incentives that we're giving, are actually the difference between making a project work and not work. I think that these incentives are critical, and, you know, I am a huge believer that they do make the difference of whether or not a project works, but I also think that we need to be very careful not to give out excess incentives, because that's the thing that's when we would be doing the thing that everybody complains about us doing, which is just essentially making a giveaway to somebody who doesn't need it, whether that's the previous landowner in a sale to redevelopment transaction, which there's some real risk that, you know, essentially the presence of our incentives increase transaction values for development sites, or the developer themselves. So I think that's something we should approach with some caution.
Yeah.
Oh. Go ahead, Todd.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with what John said there with the incentives. I'd be very cautious about that too, because I like to see where other neighboring counties have someone like Cornell University in their backyard, because all that tax-exempt land across the county is just pushed onto into the homeowners and the taxpayers. You know, it's a big burden, you know, and then if we're talking about doing more, incentivizing more with these tax abatements, it just falls on the shoulders of the people that live here. It's just, you know, the other counties don't have the tax rates that we have, I don't think. You know, Tompkins County is very expensive to live in, and we already subsidize a lot as it is. But.
Heather.
Yeah, I'll just say, in the 15 years that I've been working with the IDA, particularly on the community development side of the projects, the housing and mixed-use projects, there has been a significant downgrade in return on investment, where you were seeing 15% returns and 18% returns 15 years ago. You're seeing 1 to 3 or 4% returns. You might as well put your money in the bank rather than invest in a building right now. And having seen that, one of the things that was starting to stall projects, and then the IDA did have the enhanced energy incentives. It was more incentive, but the IDA was also getting more, because it provided enough incentive to make it financially worthwhile to make these new buildings as energy efficient as they possibly could be. A couple of those projects, I think, would not have moved forward in any way, shape, or form without that extra incentive. And of course, it allowed them to do more in terms of energy efficiency in their buildings. With the addition of the housing fee, that has honestly been a struggle. The banks won't finance it. And a couple of the projects that I've seen sort of hold for a while, they're trying to figure out that piece. They've already got 30 or 40% equity in, and how much more equity can they put in and make the return on investment still positive. Has been a struggle. So while off the cuff, I would say maybe a little bit more incentive, but not a lot more incentive, may make some sense, and I'd be happy to sort of look at some other communities and, look at their housing markets and their economies and take all that sort of into context. But I think what I'm seeing is that there are communities that have housing needs. They have housing needs assessment like we do, that say we need housing at different price points and different types and different sizes, and the market's not building it. which has been the case here for decades. And so they are providing significant incentives to get the housing built, knowing that there will be future tax base. We're seeing that in Orange County and Westchester County and around Long Island, some of those communities that their housing markets are a little more similar to ours. Syracuse, Rochester, their markets really are not like our market.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, the return on investment issue is an interesting one. I think that there's we look at cash on cash return, which is only one of the ways that developers make money. There's also the fact that you're essentially earning the building by your mortgage balance being paid down and the actual appreciation of the asset over time. And I think that we've heard the well, nobody's ever going to build something at 1 or 3%. And it's like, well, actually they do when you're looking at the front end of the project is always the hungriest time. You obviously can't build something that doesn't cash flow. And your financing entity is going to have minimum debt service coverage ratios, et cetera. But I think we need to be a little careful talking about that, the returns and understanding specifically what return we're talking about, and having a bigger picture understanding of how developers make money. But sure. I think overall, yeah, that's important to understand. I think anything we can do to help with more affordable housing in this community would be worth doing.
Yeah, I mean, again, more to come here, but I think it would be worth getting some further information on what other communities are doing in terms of incentives, and trying to figure out whether the current status, all of these that are on hold, whether some different, even, short, as you said, hungry time incentive might get them to break ground. Because once they break ground, then the project's, there. I'd hesitate to move us very far in the direction of a 20-year incentive, or radically changing the percentages. But if there's something we could do that was short-term that would move these off the on-hold list. Yeah, Ann?
What about looking at a possible different structural options for affordable housing?
Well, I think we're already kind of doing that, right? They're going longer, and yeah.
But maybe just as a goal, maybe this year, just to review that and see if there's, other communities, what are they doing for that? Maybe that's part of this. What are they doing to incentivize affordable housing?
Okay, John?
It might be kind of a silly idea, but offering an additional year or two of 100% if they break ground in 2024. It's like, well, if you were going to break ground in 2025 anyway, we weren't going to get those taxes. Yeah. Heather?
We did do an analysis. It was a few years, it was before COVID, of the other IDAs and their housing policies. There was one IDA, and that was somewhere on Long Island, I want to say Brookhaven or West Babylon, or it's one of those communities that required affordable housing, and it had to be, what's the word I'm looking for, governed by another entity. But none of the other IDAs at that point were requiring any sort of affordable housing. Nobody's doing an affordable housing set aside that I'm aware of. Other communities, when I've talked to other IDAs, and I've been at 2 conferences in the past 9 months where there have been presentations on housing in particular, and it's about housing that the market is not building, and it's really market rate housing. That there's been a housing needs assessment that shows there's a need for it, and so they're trying to incentivize for-profit developers to build above market and market rate housing because the market's not providing it. And so that's where most of the housing incentives are going. I think about 25% of the housing units that all the IDAs in the state have delivered incentives to as of 2 years ago, the last year we have data, were affordable units, which is about on par with what we've got. my state association does an analysis, has done an analysis twice now to sort of augment the Paris data because it's very antiquated and very bizarre, for lack of a better word. And I can share some of those numbers that they've seen in terms of housing. Like we're pretty progressive in this community, that we're requiring an affordable housing set aside, and those funds are, you know, supporting more affordable housing within the community. Nobody's looking at that, not yet anyway, but, you know, I talk about it every chance that I get.
Okay. Well, it sounds like
My
there's...
apologies, Rich and board. I have to have an appointment at 3:30 that I frankly can't miss. Steve, my colleague, is here. If something comes up.
Okay.
I apologize, but I just, like I said, I have an appointment I can't miss.
Not a problem, Russ. Thanks for coming.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Okay. It seems like we have consensus here that it would make sense for us to just at least have the conversation, seeing what other options we might have for perhaps short-term incentives to prime the pump. Anything further on this issue? Keep going. Yes.
Hey, Heather, have you heard any feedback from CS Energy yet? They came in front of the board before for a solar project they wanted to do out in the old Milliken Power Station from
No.
there to Groton. Okay.
No, I know there's a battery storage project that's being put together there, but that's not CS Energy. Isn't CS Energy the industrial scale solar?
Yeah, the
The
one
Yellow
you wanted to
Barn
do.
project. That's
Yeah.
not at Milliken. That's 1,000 acres that covers part of Lansing and part of Groton. That's an industrial scale project.
What part phase is that in right now?
They submitted their application to ORES, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting at the state. ORES does all the approval processes. They've taken that away from the local municipalities. They submitted that application. There were some questions, and there was a 3-month time period to submit some additional information. I know as of January that they said that ORES said everything was complete. It's all online. It's all publicly available. And their estimate is it's about a 9-month review process before those approvals happen. The solar folks have reached out to me. They've reached out to the communities. They want to negotiate host community agreements with the communities. I've had a couple of meetings with the town supervisors. I've had an initial conversation with the CS Energy folks about pilot. They were supposed to follow up with me in April. I have them on my to-do list.
Okay.
And I, said I've done some research on other industrial scale solar projects because they're really different than the off-site commercial solar policy kind of thing that we've done. To understand what the pilot levels are, and I've talked to some of my counterparts. Genesee County has two, a 250 and a 500 megawatt project, to understand where they got to what their pilot amount is, and in relation to the capital stack. So, we're starting to talk. I think their goal is to have the pilot in place or approved sometime before, soon after that ORES process is done.
Thank you. This is something I wanted to warn the board about, because I've had talks with them already too, and they one of the contractors I work with finally got paid off the last $300,000, which they've been owed for they've been trying to collect money for over 2 years. And I got another contractor that they're in debt to for $3.5 million. And they got liens against everybody involved in the project. And CS Solar is still, CS Energy, CS Solar, Conti Solar, they keep changing the name. It's another LLC. And this is the kind of experience that I see in the solar business with people like this. $3.5 million. And in this particular contract, it probably employs 80 members here locally. You know, $3.5 million.
Good to know.
All right. Well, let's keep moving. You have a local labor waiver you just wanted to report on?
Oh, as per the local labor policy, I'm providing, you know, an overview of the most recent administrative waiver that was approved for the dean.
I did have one question on it. It says, do not have local contact or list. Is that something we were working on putting together?
Todd had offered to put together a list, but I don't have one.
Okay. Is that coming?
Yeah, I'm going to check with what I sent to Kurt. See what I sent to him, and if I'm missing something there, I'll get that out to him.
Yeah, they did. The dean did reach out to us and asked us if we had a list, and Kurt said, no, I don't have a list.
I guess see what, okay. I'll go through my
that would be
emails and see
great.
what I got there.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Okay. John, did you have something?
Yeah, I think that this is like, I don't remember exactly what our policy says here, but it seems like they ought to have been able to find someone locally who could bid on flooring. And, you know, I think that's something, as we consider our policy from time to time, we should consider, you know, policies that this is modeled after require that you actually make an effort to find someone as the sponsoring entity.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd say, looking at the size of that building, it would have been a lot of flooring. I don't know if there's somebody local that could do that much.
They don't specify what type of flooring. There are probably multiple flooring contractors, depending. It's like you often would have like a carpet contractor and a separate hardwood contractor and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we don't really have a ton of information here, but you know, and perhaps scale is an issue. I think that's very real. That happens, where it's like, oh yeah, there are lots of electricians, but are any of them big enough to bid on a stairs? Maybe not, you know? So I think that's well received, but I also think it's something that we should consider as we're looking at
I think getting that list into play would do good things. So, yeah. Okay. All right, then we have anything further, Heather?
Nothing further.
All right, then we have minutes from March 13th, 2024. Could I get a motion? Todd moves and seconds. Questions or comments on the minutes? I'll call the roll. Doc?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. And I believe there was a addition to the agenda to have an executive session to talk about some litigation and a personnel matter. Could I get a motion to go into executive session? John moves, Todd seconds. Any discussion? Ready to vote? Duxon?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, and I would indicate that we will likely take no action after executive session. We'll recess for a minute to go offline.